Hi and welcome to this webinar of daily living of Parkinson, Quebec. My name is Claudine Naen, and I will be your moderator for this event. Thank you for being with us. Today, the webinar will try to answer the question, how to prepare to travel when you have Parkinson disease. I would like to introduce you our speaker, Ms. Isabelle Ducharme, Board President of the Quebec organization. Ms. Ducharme is involved in social insertion activities for people with disabilities. She has a bachelor in communication from the University of Montreal and completed a master in tourism management and planning from the University of Quebec in Montreal. She also completed training in communication and leadership from Dale Carnegie in order to improve her communication skills. Ms. Ducharme is the board president of Quebec, a Quebec-based organization with the goal of making tourism and culture accessible to people with physical limitation. Before I turn it over to Ms. Ducharme, just let you know that there is a box at the bottom right where you can write your question. If it's a technical question, it will be answered directly. If it's a question about the subject, we will try to answer it at the end of the presentation. So now, please welcome our speaker, Ms. Duchamp.
Hello, it's my pleasure to be talking to you today. I'm quite happy because it's very rare that I get to do this presentation in English. So it gives me a chance to talk to a different audience and as well to obviously practice my English. So just a quick review of what was already said. We're going to be talking about accessible vacations in Quebec and around the world. If you have any questions after this webinar, you can always reach me at the address that is on the first page here. I believe that the PowerPoint will be available for you after if you want to review and if you want to just have a copy of it. So as you can see on my first slide here, there is definitely different ways of looking at vacations and tourism activities. So it could be going to a hotel and getting a good doorman to greet us, or just relaxing on a beach, looking at the beach, or going in the water, or just being inside and looking out on wonderful views that we can get of different cities. So it can be many things depending on what you like to do. What is important is just to remember that anything's possible. It just probably will require a bit more planification than it would have before you had a disability. Just let me get used to the way of changing the slides. So first of all, just to give you an idea of where I come from, I'm a person, as I put a few pictures there just to, for those of you that are more into images than words, I've always been outgoing ever since I was a little girl. As you can see, the first picture that I put there is a picture of me going for the first day of kindergarten. I was so ready and so happy to go and learn new things and meet new people. And then that's the way I grew up, and that's the way I became slowly a very active adolescent and a teenager, and then adult. I traveled lots when I was a kid, camping with my parents and with some of my family, and I did a few travel exchanges as well to go and learn English out in BC and to humanitarian help out in Europe and things like that. And then eventually, I decided that I really liked the teamwork that I had in those student exchanges and decided to join the Army. And that's the other picture that you see there. I was an aircraft mechanic for the Army, and I was based in Manitoba when I had a car accident. So I don't have Parkinson, but I do understand the difference between traveling when you have no disability and traveling when you have a disability, whether it be that you're walking slower, that you are getting around in a wheelchair, or whatever the specific needs that you have. So my situation is that I get around in a motorized wheelchair because I have a spinal cord injury following a car accident that happened in 1988 when I was still working for the armed forces. It has nothing to do with my work, but everything to do with who I am today. Because once I had my accident and I went to rehab, and we figured out that it was going to be impossible for me to walk again, and that I worked really hard to have some movement in my arms. So now I can, move a little bit my arms, but I can't use my fingers. They don't move. And I don't feel anything below the shoulders. I had to figure out what I wanted to do with my life, and I tried to concentrate on what I could still do. And when I thought about it, what I really loved was meeting people, talking to people, and traveling. So it made sense to do my studies in travel, and that's why I first went to communications to be able to work with all the tools that you need to talk about a subject. And then I went on with my master's in tourism planification, and that brought me to work with Kerol after that. So what the other pictures that you can see there are basically the pictures of me after the accident and me many years later, very happy to have graduated from my master's. And all of this also brought me to realize that I couldn't really work full time, but I could feel the accomplishment of helping by volunteering, and that's what brought me to the board at Kerol and brought me to giving social integration conferences and things like that. And I wouldn't have gone through the readaptation. I wouldn't have gone through all the things I've gone through since if I didn't realize that I could still travel, even though I was first in a manual wheelchair and then in a motorized wheelchair. I needed that to help me through the rest of my life. So I do believe that there is a strong case for working on improving work and study and all sorts of accessibility and programs. But I do believe that we can't go through life with just work or studies, or we need also to do tourism activities. My travel experiences, as you can see from the picture, they go from just going solo with my caregiver, as you can see by the beach in Mexico, to just with friends and family in Calgary, also for a group outing following a conference out in China. So there are many ways you can travel. It's really up to you, up to your needs, up to what you feel like. But I did travel before my accident, after, in a manual, in a motorized wheelchair, and for different reasons. And I won't say it was always perfect, but there was always a very good outcome and a very good feeling about traveling and having stories to talk about. So we're going to start by what can we do in Quebec, since it is our where we live. And I think we need to travel in Quebec for our own experience, but also to make sure that accessibility will keep growing. Because if they don't see us going out into restaurants, museums, and hotels and different activities, then they don't see the need to become accessible. So we have to use the venues that are accessible so that we can prove that there is, when it is accessible, we do go to these activities. And that's why, once again, you have many activities shown on the pictures that you can see, from outdoor activities, inside, uh, summer, winter. So there's really many, many options. Just quickly, Kerul was founded in 1979, so it wasn't yesterday. It's been the same person that founded Monsieur André Leclerc is still acting CEO and very active in making sure that we improve the accessibility of tourism here in the province. So that's our expertise, but also making sure that we collaborate with international organization and make sure that we learn from each other and that we can have good experiences everywhere. Basically, Kerol is one of the few organizations I know around the world that caters to the needs of people with disabilities, but also to the needs of the businesses, the tourism businesses that want to become accessible or that are accessible and that want to promote it. So that's I think the tool that is more useful to the travelers to know is that we have different tools that can help you know what is accessible in the province. The first tool that you can use, unfortunately, it is only in French, but if you can if you can read French, it is very useful. It's a quarterly magazine, and in each number, you will have travel stories. Every time I travel somewhere, I'll write a little story. I'll say where I stayed, what activities I did, and that way, if you're not sure where you want to go, or if you want to have information about a destination, you can look at those stories and they can inspire you and maybe make your life easier when you're trying to plan your travel. And you will also have news about what Kerol is doing, what we know or what we find out that is new around the world and that could be useful to you that want to travel. Uh, these are printed versions, but if you decide that you want to know more than what you were getting for that quarter, you can go on the website and you will have all the past editions that will be there too for you to look at. Another tool that could be very useful, and this time it is bilingual, you can go in French or in English, it's our website. We have all sorts of information about what we do, like our newsletters and things like that will be on there. Information on if you want to become a member of Kerol, and also if you want to receive the newsletter in your inbox. And you will also have, as you can see at the bottom there, different options looking at researches that we have done. But the main button I think that will you will want to look at is services to travelers. And under that one, you will have different buttons again that you can click on. And they go from if you need assistance when you travel, organizations that we found that would be able to help you. Let's say you want to know where can I go that the person that comes with me will be free of charge. Where does my parking permit work? Different links to international destinations. So if we've gone or we know somebody that's gone to a destination anywhere around the world, we will put it on that section. And you can go by country, you can go by destinations. And I think one of the tool again that could be interesting for you is the travel agents. So we have listed the travel agents that we gave training to. So if you were, let's say, in a region and you wanted to see which one you can go and visit, that's where you can find the list to see which one is in your region, or that the one that you can call. You know that now lots of things can be done by phone or by email, so that's also a possibility. So you will find that on the website again. The other tool that could be very useful for you, especially for the province of Quebec, is Quebec for All. If you've heard of the Accessible Road before, it's the new version of the Accessible Road. Basically, you have it as a magazine that comes out once a year with suggestions of what to do in Quebec and that would be accessible. What you can do research as well. You can look. Usually, we'll have some thematic. It could be looking at, let's say, winter sports or any type of activities. And we'll, in this first edition, we also put our 100 best for tourism activities in the province. The thing that you have to know is that on the website, you will have the information of the places that are fully accessible and the places that are partially accessible. And that way you can decide which place you want to go. A place fully accessible, obviously, you don't need to ask any questions. One that says it's partially accessible, then ideally you will go on the website and see why it's partially accessible. It could be because there's no grab bars in the bathroom at the museum. It could be because there is a very steep hill in the zoo and we can't change that steep hill. So the rest is good, but there is a steep hill. And then once you know that, it's up to you to decide if you want to go anyway, or if it's something that bothers you or not. Maybe you're in a manual wheelchair, but you have somebody pushing you, so it doesn't really matter whether it's a steep hill or not. So it's really a good source to find out what you can do in the province. And you will also find in the Quebec for All um, the new concept that we developed that is called Destination for All, and that will be cities or small parts of a city that wants to be identified as a good destination for all. So there will be stars from 1 to 5 to define a destination. The first one that is part of the concept is Victoriaville. They're really renowned for their accessibility. For now, they have 3 stars out of 5, but because of this new concept, they're working even more on becoming more accessible. And on the website, you will also get tips from different travelers on what to do to be sure that you're well prepared. So that's just to give you an overview that there's 677 attractions and activities. There's restaurants and bar. There's a few. There's a close to 350 lodging establishments. There's even some backgrounds, some campgrounds, some fully accessible, some partially accessible. Basically, when we say they are accessible, is that there is a sanitary block close to where you can camp, and that way you can use a bathroom and go for a shower and things like that, and they're made bigger than they usually are for the general population. This is just to give you an idea. When we say that an establishment is fully accessible, you will see the person sitting in the wheelchair. When we talk about partially accessible, we put somebody behind the person just to show that you might need help in that venue. And when there are specific information for people that are blind or people that are of an hearing impairment, then we will put that logo as well. And then you can go and look at, is it because there is menu in braille? Is it because there is better sound for people that are having partial hearing impairment and things like that? So these are the basic logos that you will see and that will help you. So why stay in Quebec? Well, as you can see, I already put nice activities for the pictures outside to really enjoy some of the nice outdoors activities that we can do. But obviously, as I said before, it can be anything inside, outside, and things like that. But first of all, to discover our own province, like most people around the world, we rarely visit around our house or around our cities, and we go to cities across the ocean and things like that. So why not discover our own province before we go outside? Uh, Obviously, as I said before, if we use the venues here, then we are encouraging the industry to become more accessible. But also, if you do your first outing, your first night out, staying in a hotel or in a B&B or wherever you want to stay other than your house, if you do it, let's say you live in Montreal and you go to Quebec City, or you live in Quebec City and you go to Magog or whatever, if it's just one night and you forgot some things at home, it'll be easier next time to take notes and say, okay, this time I forgot my medication. I got some emergency medication in the local drugstore, and next time I won't forget it, because usually it's always by my nightstand and I forgot to take it with me. Or I realize now I can't sleep well if I don't have my own pillow. It'll be much easier to say that to live through that one night, and then make sure you take whatever you forgot next time, to do it with one night than do it with, let's say, a week in Mexico or 2 weeks or 3 weeks in Europe. So that way you can take notes and make sure that you don't forget your thing, whatever you forgot the next time. So if we go into details of what we need when we travel, obviously we need, first thing is transportation. If you want to go, even if you want to go inside your own city, obviously you will have to Um, Once you want to get out of the house, you probably will either take the bus, take your car. But there are also the things that you have to think about is if you go outside of your city, you will need transportation. So in the local transportation, I think not everybody knows that now in most cities in the province and around the world, it is possible to call accessible taxis. Those minivans that you can get in with your wheelchair and you have the ramp and you're tied in and you are never charged more than a regular fare. They're not allowed to charge you more. So it's if somebody wants to charge you more because it's an accessible taxis, then you do have to write a complaint after. Um, Also, the other thing that many people don't know is if you're allowed to use the paratransit in your city or in your village, then you're allowed to have a transit number, paratransit number in the destination that you are going. Again, if you're from Quebec and you're going to Magog, you're from Magog, you're going to Montreal, you can call ahead of time the local paratransit, let's say the Montreal STM, and say, I am coming to your city for the weekend, for the week, and I want to be using the paratransit door to door service. And they will give you a temporary number, and that way you can use the paratransit like if you were a local. So it could be very useful. It could be cheaper than going by taxi, and it could be less of a headache than using the local regular buses because then you don't have to look for your route. Your driver will. And the final thing I wanted to tell you is that you can rent a vehicle with the hand control. So if you're at home and you use a hand control to drive your car and you're going to a different city, but you're not driving to that city, it is possible to go through the other regular companies like Hertz and Avis and companies like that and ask to have the hand control installed on the vehicle. And for now, in Quebec, the only city where you can rent a van with the ramp on the side is Jean Légaré. Um, I hear that there will be a new company soon where you will be able to have your car delivered to whichever city you are in Quebec and rent it that way. But for now, it's not as far as I know, it's not in function. But keep your ears open just in case. The other option is when you want to go from one city to another is to use the what we call the intercity buses, like the Greyhound and all of those bigger buses. I put a picture to show that usually we will getting through. If you're in a wheelchair, you will be getting up on the bus at the back through a platform, and you will be tied down like you would. Well, your wheelchair will be tied down like you would be in paratransit. Usually, using the bathroom is not that easy, so it's better if you can maybe go before you come in the bus. Certain people will decide to just not drink during the ride just to be sure. You might be interested to know that if you need a companion when you travel, your companion will travel for free. Only thing is, you have to write or call at la Fédération des transporteurs par autobus, and they will give you that card that allows you to have somebody with you that doesn't pay for the fare. The main reason when I talk to you about when it's free for the companion, it's usually not to penalize the person that wants to get out of the house but can't do it if they're not alone. So they will be asking questions like, do you need help feeding yourself? Do you need help taking your medication? Do you need help going to the bathroom? And that's what's going to define if you're allowed to have the free companion or not. And when you do fill out that form, sometimes they will ask for a doctor's signature, but what is good is that when you sign it, it's good for 5 years. When you do reserve, whether it be the bus or the train, it's always a good idea to do it minimum 48 hours ahead of time because usually there's usually room for one person in a wheelchair. So you don't want to be stuck on a schedule that there is already somebody else that reserved and there's no room for you. So further ahead, you can reserve the best it is. It will ensure that you get the spot that you want at the time that you want. Uh, for VRL, what is nice is you can look out for discounts on Tuesdays. You don't have to travel on a Tuesday, but if you reserve on a Tuesday, there's always certain deals that you can get. And when you want to reserve for somebody in a wheelchair, you have to call. You can't do it on the website. There's often cheaper prices on the website, but because we can't um, reserve ourselves on the website because we have to call, they will still give us the internet fare. The Also, it's nice to know that for now, on some of the destinations, the only wagon of the train that is accessible, it's the one that is in first class. But because it's not our fault that the only accessible place is in the first class, they will charge us the regular class, and we will get the VIP treatment, and so will the person that accompanies us. Regarding lodging, a lot of people think that if we want accessibility, we find it only in big hotels. It is true in many cases that we get more accessibility in bigger hotels, but we are getting more and more information about smaller chains, smaller hotels, and even other options that are still very accessible. We have more and more people that understand the importance of becoming accessible if you want to have more people come to your place. So as you can see, there are more partially accessible than fully accessible lodging options at this time in Quebec, but we still have some good option in this partially accessible depending on the needs of the person. And we have, as I said before, campgrounds. I wanted to give you a few options. As I just said, there are options other than regular hotels. One of the options that could be even better cost-wise is les chalets. They're situated in eastern townships, and they built a first cottage that you can rent, and there's 3 rooms and different options in beds, and a nice big terrace in the back, and view on the lake and things like that. And when you get there, everything is there. There's all the everything you need to cook. All you need to do is bring your food and yourself and your clothes because everything else is there. And it worked so well that now they built a second one. So one is more closer to the lake and one is more really in the woods. So whatever you like best. The other option is the B&B, and those two were really built with the accessibility in mind. So you have the owners that are very friendly and very happy to cater to the needs of people with disabilities. The B&B is more in the Laurentians, and I also put the option of the tents in that's in Oka. They have these tents that are permanent, and you can just come in again and all is there. You have a little fridge and things like that, and they're usually by close to a sanitary block where you can have your shower and things like that. And at Oka, the park, which is really what is really nice, is they also have like a boardwalk by the lake, and they have different options just to be sure that they are fully accessible, including a wheelchair that will help you go on the beach. And finally, if you're more adventurous, there is also the option of the yurt, which is an option that used to be utilized quite a few years ago. Regarding activities, as you can see, we have a lot of possibilities of attractions and restaurants and information centers, and there's some fully and some partially accessible. But there are really many options, whether you're an outdoors or indoors or quiet or more party person. I think, especially if your situation is new, if you used to be do a lot of sports and now you're walking a bit slower, or it's new that you are getting around in a wheelchair, I think you have to explore what you like to do now. The first idea would be definitely to test it in the area where you live. In my case, I never used to like museums. I found it too long, too boring, and things like that. And once I finished my studies and things like that, and I decided to see what could be done and what I liked and things like that, I discovered that now I like to take the time and listen to the audio guide of a painter that when I go and visit a museum and things like that. So I put a few things out there. Yeah, I used to be a very sportive person. Now I'm more one to watch sports. So, I go to the F1 race every year. I do go to the Bell Center to see the Montreal Canadiens, still hoping that one day they will get better. Um, but you have to go and explore and see what you like now before you go outside of your city. And that way you won't decide again to go for a travel in Europe. And once you get there, it's a city of museum and you find them boring. Or some people think they won't like going to the beach destination and they force themselves to go because the spouse maybe wants to go. And once they get there, they realize that it's nice to be just sitting by the beach with a book and not to have the mail and the phone calls and things like that. So you really have to try it out to be sure what you like now. Other activities that you could do that sort of, you know, maybe things that you didn't think were still possible because of your situation. There are different apple picking options with um, smaller trees. So trees that you can reach out, even if you're sitting in a wheelchair, or if you can't really stretch that high, or you don't want to go up a ladder. The trees are smaller, and that way you can reach out and pick your own apples. In the Montreal Botanical Garden, it's an environment where there are many options like the biodome and the insectarium and things like that. But inside the Montreal Botanical Garden, there is what is called La Cour des Sens, and that was first thought of for people that are blind. You can touch, taste, smell the different plantations that are there. There it goes from flowers to herbal that can be used, herbal leaves that can be used for tisanes and stuff like that. So you can go and do the tour on your own, or there is often even a at least a guide and sometimes a blind guide that can really help you through that little course. And it's really fun. It's really you should really try it out. And I put two other options, which is the whale watching and just going and watching the waterfalls that we have here in the province. So there are options that are not just a museum and not just going to see a concert and things like that. There are also options for those that are more adventurous. There is dog sledding and there is adapted skiing. Adapted skiing is in many ski hills now across the province. And the dog sledding, I think right now is in one or two venues that you can find on our website. There's also the wheelchair. It's the wheelchair I was talking about before, where in Oka. That's Oka has it in permanent, but if you wanted to rent one, you can also go to places that rent wheelchairs, and some of them, like La Maison André Vigier here in Montreal, do rent them for by the week, by the weekend, or whatever you need. And for those of you that maybe like me enjoy water, I used to love to swim. Now I find it too complicated, but I still like to be on water. There's also the option of sailing that you can find with the AQVA, and it's based in Point Claire. And basically, you can either be just floating on the water with the sailboat with somebody else driving it, or you could even decide to take the course and become the person that directs the boat. And they can adapt it to whatever is you need. If you can or can't use your hands, if you're the owner of the company is actually somebody that is a quadriplegic, but he can't move any limbs. He can only move his head. So the way he directs the boat is by the sip and puff. So it's by just blowing in a straw. So as you can see, many things are possible. Equipment rental. Some people wonder as well because maybe at home you can walk with, let's say, on your own, but slowly, or with a walker. But you're wondering, well, yeah, but if I go and visit a museum, or if I go for a week in France, uh, I don't want to be taking the wheelchair on the plane, so I guess I'm not going to travel. Just know that you can always rent equipment at the destination that you're going. You just need to call ahead of time. In my case, I need the Hoyer lift that you can see on the left to get in and out of bed, and I need the shower chair to go and have a shower. So I will call ahead of time and I will rent it through a company, and that way I don't have to take it with me on the plane and on the transportation that I will get from the airport. So it makes it much easier. Also, I put the scooter there because my grandfather thought he would never be able to visit Vegas because at 90 he told us, I've never been, I'll never be. And he thought he just couldn't follow us if we went to Vegas. So by renting one of those scooters in Vegas, we got to go to Vegas with him and he got to enjoy the venue. And we even rented a vehicle and went all the way to the Grand Canyon. So really, the options are there. It's just a question of preparing. So just to give you a little idea of things that I've done and that can be done pretty easily because we have all the information that we need. Visited the Bushwick Garden in Victoria and visited Vancouver at the same time. I've been to Niagara Falls that now offer more accessibility. You never used to be able, if you were in a wheelchair, you never used to be able to take the boat that takes you all the way under the falls, and you can go and walk behind the falls either like everybody else. Now they did put accessibility in these options. Calgary also is a good option. In all of those areas, I used the local transportation. I rented, I ordered some taxis and things like that, and it always worked out good. There is also on the international level, New York is a good option. I got to use the regular bus and to visit all the venues that are so near, so dear to all travelers when we want to go to New York. And I put Vegas, and I want to talk to just quickly about Vegas because we think that because they are so into making money that they wouldn't care about accessibility, but it's the other way around. It's really wonderful. If I go to Vegas, I know I can just leave whoever's with me by the pool and I can get around everywhere. Hotel doors open automatically. All venues that have different shows always have reserved spots for people in wheelchair, and they do have very often options for people with hearing impairment and things like that. So it's really a good destination if you're not sure where you want to go. We also traveled to San Francisco last year. There is those steep hills, but other than that, it's a good city with good service and lots of things to see. I went to visit vineyards around as well, so there are many options. New Orleans was another place where I got to visit lots of things. And just for your information, I used to travel to different sun destinations. Right now, because I'm in a motorized wheelchair, it's a bit more complicated because the adapted transport is hard to find. So the only place I found good adapted transportation was in the region of Cancun, Riviera Maya, and it's a lady that owns a company called Cancun Accessible, and really she has good drivers with safe vehicles. She can even take you on tours, and that's why I put the picture of Tulum in Mexico. She is really willing to help in any way that she can, and she does rent the shower chair and things like that. There are also international travels that I did. Australia is still my best place to date. because of everything that we get to see there, because of hearing the Australian accent for me, and the accessibility was amazing. Spain is one of the European destination that has really worked hard on accessibility. So it's really interesting to go there just to encourage them because they do work so hard on the accessibility. And I did put a picture of the hop on, hop off sightseeing tour. Most touristic cities now have those hop on, hop off buses, and they will always be accessible. So you can get on that bus and do a tour of the city. You can just stay in the bus and listen to the audio guide, or you can stop whenever you see a place that interests you, and then once you finish visit, you hop back off on the bus and you continue your journey. So you have one price to pay for the day, or you can rent it for, you can buy a ticket for 2 days, 3 days, whatever the option is that you prefer. So basically, there's a few things that are different when you want to travel on the international level. Like on any other occasion that you will decide to do a touristic activity with an overnight stay, you will have to look at the lodging, at activities that you want to do, at local transportation and things like that. Where it differs is you will need land or sky transportation over there. But one thing that I think you should think of is if you're not sure where you want to go on an international level, think about destinations where there were Olympic Games. That way, they had to have Paralympic Games and they had to become more accessible. One small uh, clinch here is Beijing did everything they had to do to have the Olympics, and that included making their public transportation accessible, making sure that there is accessibility in their touristic venues. And once the Paralympic Games were finished, they undid everything that they had done. So there's no more elevators for the subway. There's no more seats, free space in the regular buses. And wherever there were elevators in the touristic venues, they haven't worked since. So that's one thing to think about. There is an option to travel there with a travel agency that has their own accessible vehicles, but just know before you decide to go. Also, usually, if you book through a travel agent, they will tell you the name of a person that will be the contact once you get to your destination. Keep in mind that person usually doesn't have any information about accessibility or medical situations and things like that. So it's always a good idea to think of finding a local organization. In your case, it could be the local Parkinson organization or the local person with disability organization. Make sure you have that with you. And that way, if you have an issue once you get to your destination, you can always reach out and say, listen, I'm not feeling good. Is there a better a local clinic that I can go? I something broke on my wheelchair. Do you know where I can have it repaired and things like that? And that way you won't be going around and asking everybody before you can find somebody that actually knows what you're talking about. And also keep in mind that you will most likely need documentation and vaccination before you go. And because we know passport is now an obligation wherever you travel to outside of Canada, and vaccination in different destinations might be needed, but in both cases, usually you will need to have that put in, like the request put in quite a few weeks, if not months, before you go. I had one destination where the vaccination had to start a year before. So make sure you ask, when do I need to do it before I go? And the passport is always a good idea. And insurance, a lot of people think because they have a disability, they can't have insurance anymore. Well, I'm telling you, what you have in your situation that is new, like within the usually 3 months, sometimes 6 months before you travel, might not be covered. But get the coverage for everything else that you can get because we never know what can happen. and the bill goes up really fast. You can just break an arm falling out of the, let's say, coming out of the hotel because it was slippery because it rained, and it's going to go into thousands and thousands of dollars. So you want to be sure that you get the insurance for what is possible for you. Lots of people ask me, but how do you travel? How do you take the flight? And how does it work? I put two pictures just to give you an idea. The first picture is Stephanie is about to transfer into that small wheelchair. And this wheelchair is what will get you from the front door of the airplane to your seat. So once you transferred into that seat, you will be taken all the way to the right place in the aisle and then transfer into your seat. If, like me, you can't transfer yourself, they will make sure that two people come and help you transfer into your seat. But you will be seating like everybody else in the regular seat, and your wheelchair will go down in with the luggage. Remember, if you have any type of special needs, whether it be you can't carry your luggage, or you know you won't be able to take it from the where it turns when they bring back the luggage, or you know that you will need a wheelchair from when you check into the door of the aircraft and things like that. You need to mention that right at the beginning, because then they might have to transfer you to the medical department. Everything will be written down, and then you will have proof that you said you needed it. And once you get to the airport, they will have to give you what you asked for. Um, you will always be, if you have any type of special needs, you will always be the first one in and the last one out. And it's not to punish you, it's just to make sure that it's safer for you when, if you're walking slower, or if you're having a hard time transferring into the seat, that there's not all these travelers that just want to get to their seat and push you around and things like that. Um, between choosing between a direct flight or a stopover is really up to you. I prefer a direct flight so that I don't have to do that many transfer from one seat to another. Other people will say, well, I have backaches when I'm sitting down too long, or I know I won't be able to use it will be too complicated to use the bathroom on the flight. So I prefer to have a stopover, and that way I can use the airport toilet and things like that, and then get back to my next flight. It's really up to you. You just have to think about it ahead of time. And the last thing I want to say about traveling by air is in Canada, if you're traveling with a Canadian company, your companion can travel for free again if you can prove that you need help when you travel. And that is good, let's say, for Air Canada going from Montreal to Vancouver, but it won't work for let's say Montreal to New York or Montreal to Paris, because it's really a Canadian law. So for now, that's the way it is. Also, if you need to bring more luggage because of your disability, whether it be you need to bring diapers, you need to bring more medication, you need to bring more clothes because you know you get dirty quickly, or you need to bring your manual and motorized wheelchair, you can never be charged extra because it's linked to your disability or to your illness. So just remember that. And regarding traveling options, the last portion I wanted to talk about is cruises. To me, it's a paradise of accessibility. It's a good way if you're a bit worried about, well, what if I go to Mexico or Caribbeans and I get sick, or things like that. On the ship, there will always be medical staff. There usually are different language options. Obviously, the first language is English, but usually you can ask for service in Spanish and French, and they have people that know many languages. Also, you can have, if you had to rent, let's say, a scooter or a lift to get in and out of bed and things like that, there is a company called Special Needs at Sea, and that company will deliver that to your cabin, so you don't have to worry about that. But just two warnings: if you do decide to go on a cruise, make sure you ask for an itinerary where at all stops there is a dock. Otherwise, you will have to transfer into a smaller boat to get to the land. And then, if you can't transfer into that small boat, then you won't be able to get out of the ship. Some people decide that they want to do a cruise and only stay on the ship, but it's really up to you. And the last thing is, make sure you ask if you need if you can't walk a few steps, you can't go up the steps of a bus, then make sure that you ask if there is accessible transportation between the airport and the ship. And that way, if there's not, then you can ask for special transportation. So just to give you an idea of the cabin I had on my cruise. So as you can see, it's very spacious and very comfortable. And for those of you that might wonder if they can still go in the water even though they can't really stand up and things like that, there are different options. The first one on the left is what most pools have in the States. It's an hydraulic chair, so you can sit on it from outside. It turns, goes down in the water, and then maybe you can put a floater onto you, and you can undo the seat belt and get around in the pool. And the pool, the swimming option or the beach option that I'm showing in the middle is pretty awesome. It's a boardwalk that's right in the middle of the beach, instead of usually it's always outside of the beach. This time it's in the middle of the beach with the little circle in the middle where you can sit and be with your family at the beach. And again, two different options of wheelchairs that go in the water for the top one, and that goes on the beach for the bottom one. The bottom one is really nice, is that it can be driven like a motorized wheelchair, so you can really get around the beach on your own. So quickly, because I see that time is really flying by, just remember, start with one night. That way you'll figure out what you like, what you don't like, what you've forgotten, things like that. Try to reserve in advance whatever you want to do. It's always better, either because there's not many options, there's not many spots that you can reserve, but also to get your discounts. Reservation, make sure you know all your needs before you call. If you have a wheelchair, they will ask, what's the size, the weight, and things like that. If you have allergies, whether it be medication or food. Also, if you have any medication, you will need to have that list with you. And also make sure that you ask if they have any specific program for if you need to have a companion with you. And finally, just make sure that when you do your travel, you enjoy your stay. You forget all the troubles that you had at home and you just enjoy where you are. You take pictures, and whenever you see that somebody is doing a good job accessibility wise, remember to tell them. We're good for complaining, but we're not used to tapping on the back people that do good jobs. So make sure you do that so that they know that it is appreciated. And once you get back, then that will give you stories to tell. Maybe you will even reach out to people you haven't seen in a while. Guess what? I've just come back from a travel and I'd like to show you some pictures. Do you think you want to come over? Should I go over to your place? And you know what? Some days we're just feeling blue, especially in the winter when it's harder to get out. While getting out these pictures, you can relive that trip and be happier that day. And finally, the best thing to do is to plan your next trip. Why not? You will have new experiences, and it's always good to have something to look forward to. So that's it for me. I don't know if we had any questions.
So thanks a lot for this conference, Ms. Ducharme. So yeah, we will start with some questions. So if you have questions, you can just ask them in the corner, on the top corner. So I will start with one question that we had. So there's some people that asking if there is a difference of price between regular ski or like ski for a person with disabilities, like the
Well, it's
equipment you show.
Yeah, no,
If
it's
there is like
there's definitely no extra charge. All the ski hills that do have the equipment for somebody that wants to do the ski, whether it be on their own, sitting on the ski, or with a trainer or somebody that is behind you. There's no extra cost. There's some cases where there's even some rebate, uh, or they will let you try it first to see if you like it. So there are many options, but there's definitely no extra cost.
So I know that I asked you before in French this question, but I will also add this one by some of our the people that is there. If there is there tips when you want to go to the washroom? Because there's some people that say I'm scared to go when like I'm traveling in a plane and stuff like that. So when you're taking the plane, by example, is there some tips you can tell to them to give to
Well,
them?
yeah, we actually did write an article. I think it was a three-page article on solution that we thought of. It was my friend that has multiple sclerosis and that can stand up just for maybe do one step and is in a manual wheelchair, and myself that is in a motorized wheelchair. And what we came up with is there are many, many options, especially when we talk about two people around us. But one of the things that what we heard the most is that some people will make sure they won't drink 2 to 3 hours before going and not on the flight. Others will say, well, I don't like it, but for the duration of the flight, I will put a diaper on. Or other people will say, because it's only the urinary tract that they're worried about, then they'll say, I'll just put a catheter in for the time of the flight. So it's really there are options depending on what you like, don't like. Some of them might please you more or less. Mind you, now there are definitely lots of designs of new uh, toilets that are on airplanes that would be a bit bigger, a bit easier to get to. If you're able to at least transfer on your own on another chair, there is now most big aircrafts have one of those foldable wheelchair. So the flight attendant, will be able to bring you that wheelchair. You have to be able to transfer or either on your own or with somebody that is with you on that wheelchair. And then they will take you all the way to the right area where you can transfer and do your business and then come back to your seat. But you really have to be able to transfer on that aisle chair by yourself.
Okay, thanks a lot. Um, with Parkinson, there is a lot of medication that need to be taken. So there is someone that asked if you need to travel for 1 month and you bring a lot of medication with you that are not sell in the country that you're going to visit. Is there a chance that it can pass at the board, or is there like what you can do if like you have some
Yeah.
problem when you're on the other country with this?
Yeah. Whether it's a short or long trip, whether it's a little or a lot of medication, usually the rule is always the same. Your medication should always be in the original package. Ideally, something that you got directly from the drugstore with the prescription on it. If you're used to doing the transfer into those daily boxes that you can just say, okay, today I did took the morning ones, I did take the morning ones that did, lunch and things like that. The best thing you can do is cross the border with the medication still in its original package. Once you get to your travel destination, then you transfer them on your daily dosage and things like that. The other option is with your uh, um, local drugstore, you can ask them and they can give you the prescription um, on a daily dosage and things like that already in packets but that are sealed, and that way the people at customs won't be able what they won't be able to say anything because it's really written that it is a prescription and things like that. So that shouldn't be any reason why you can't bring the medication unless, let's say, you're going for a month and you're bringing for 2 months. Then they might say that's a bit much. But if you're going for a month and maybe you say I brought a week more just in case something happened with my flights and things like that, then there's no reason why they should not let you do it, because all they want to know is that you know you're it's really your medication and it's really what you need. So if you do have the prescription paper, there is no reason for them to not let you, and that's good for any type of medication, whether it be insulin or anything, even if it's something that needs to be refrigerated and things like that.
And if we stay in with the medication, um, is there some tips that you can give to people for like with the jet lag and stuff like that? Because with Parkinson, people need to take their medication at really a specific time. So when you are in the other country, sometimes it can like move your schedule. So do you have any tips for that, so to help them to get back and like be able to take their medication?
Yeah. It all depends on how big of a time difference we're talking about. But usually, what I try and tell people is once you get to a destination, try to right away live in the time zone that you're in. So let's say you traveled overnight to Europe and you get there and it's 10 o'clock in the morning over there. For you, it's already 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Then you don't want to go to bed and have a nap. You want to go, stretch yourself and force yourself to at least go to bed at night, maybe at the time that you usually would or close to. That way your body will understand that now you're on that time zone. And I think it's good for medication too. I've tried one of those homeopathic options, which are just little capsules that you start taking a few days before you leave, and that really helped me be on that same time zone that I'm going to. But for now, that's the best option I would say, is make sure that you go right away on the time zone that you have over there. And there's those capsules as well that can help you.
Um, so I'm gonna go with the last question. So it's just maybe something more personal. I know that you've traveled a lot, and you're like the way you're talking about it, you really you talk with about travel with passion. So is there some place that you think people with disabilities should not go? And the other part of the question is where you suggest them to go, like the place that need to be like you need to visit if that is like the top of the accessibilities for people with disabilities. So.
Places not to go, it's kind of difficult, but because it really depends on your degree of um, how you can deal or not with places that are different. Because please, places like Vietnam and places like that are already a big shock to the system for people that don't have a disability. And you can, even when I was in China, sometime we were the attraction because we were in motorized wheelchair going around. So you're visiting the Great Wall of China, and all the Chinese people are not looking at the wall; they're looking at you, and they don't have the bubble that we have. They're really, when they look at you and they want to see your wheelchair, they're really close to you. So depending on your degree of acceptance of the difference and of then some destinations might not be good for you. But other people will say, I I'm fine, I'll go anywhere. And some people are fine with, part of they get to a country, it's not that accessible, but the local people are so willing to help them all the time. So they're carrying them in their wheelchair over, a few steps and things like that. So for the not going, not really, unless, like I said, it's just to respect your boundaries and what you're willing to accept or not. For good destinations, definitely United States in general. It's closer to us, and there's good accessibility in all the major cities, especially the touristic cities. Um, In Europe, it's still a bit difficult. It's older. It's not easy to become to make it accessible. I mentioned already Spain, that is really good, but I went to Portugal. It's not as accessible, but there is a good company called Tourism for All based in the Lisbon area, and they're really good, and they have their own vehicles, and they can take you on tours everywhere around Portugal, and they will even take you to you can do Portugal and Spain with them as well, and things like that. So there are destinations like that that are more, I guess, easier to get around. But for those who don't want to go that far, we have very interesting things that we can visit in the country, especially in Quebec. But as I mentioned before, Niagara Falls was really great to me. Calgary, Vancouver, Victoria, to name only the ones I was to. So there are definitely many options depending on if you want to go far or not. If you don't want to spend as much money, as I mentioned before, if you travel in Canada, your companion travels for free with you. So that could be, depending on for what reason you are traveling, then it can make your choice easier or harder.
Perfect. Thanks a lot. So, unfortunately, it will be all the time that we had for for this conference. So, I hope you enjoy, and thanks a lot, Ms. Duchamp, for this speak. It was really nice, and like I told you before, but you're really passionate about traveling, and it's really an inspiration. And like right now, I want to travel too. So, like it's really nice to hear from you. So, I hope everybody enjoy it, and I will invite you to our next webinar. So our next webinar will be September 20 at 1 p.m. and we'll talk about labor law. So what's happening when you have Parkinson and you're still traveling, you're still working, and there's some issue with the people who hire you, or if there's some discrimination. So we have someone from BCF cabinet that will talk about the labor law and everything you can do with that. So join us on September 20 at 1 p.m. And also don't forget to register to our season of English webinar. We have a lot of subject that we're going to talk about. So thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoy. And thanks again, Ms. Duchamp, for this presentation.
Thank you.